working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On tonight's headlines. Signal number 2 has been raised over Batanes even as Henry weakened further and moved northwestward over the Philippine Sea. On the forecast track, Henry may exit the Philippine area of responsibility tomorrow evening or Sunday morning. Key agreements on defense, culture, and other areas of cooperation will be signed during President Marcos Jr.'s state visit to Indonesia and Singapore. And a meeting of Group of 20 energy ministers opened in Bali, Indonesia. The Philippine Embassy in Cambodia, in collaboration with Habitat for Humanity Cambodia, organized a build project in Sai Chek Timay community located in Phnom Penh as part of the commemoration of the 65th anniversary of the establishment of the Philippine-Cambodia diplomatic relations. First in our news, signal number 2 has been raised over Batanes, even as Henry weakened further and moved northwestward over the Philippine Sea. On the forecast track, Henry may exit the Philippine area of responsibility tomorrow or Sunday morning. Let's listen in to Pag-asa.
Ito'y bahagyang huminaw, may taglay na itong hangin aabot ng 165 km per hour at pagbugso na aabot ng 205 km per hour. Ngayon kumikilos ito ng pa-northwest sa bilis na mabagal. So ito na yung ating binabantayan, yung binabanggit natin ng mga nakarang araw na paghinto o pagpreno nitong bagyong si Henry at nakikita natin ngayong hapon ito ay bubuelo na panorte. So pahilagan ay magiging galaw nito. And yun nga, na-spare ang Batanes. So ang worst case scenario natin is signal number 2 dito kasi hindi na siya halos bumaba. So ito na yung binabantay naman natin ngayon, ang inaantay natin is kung kailan siya kikilos pahilaga. Hindi natin sa ating monitoring na hindi na ito sumusubsob. So yun yung magandang balita. At anytime nga ay kikilos na ito papalayo ng ating bansa. And expected to exit pa rin ng ating area of responsibility madaling araw ng linggo. So yun pa rin yung nakikita natin sa ngayon. At dahil nga medyo lumalapit ito at precautionary na rin natin dyan sa mga kababayan natin sa Batanes, itinasa natin ang babala ng bagyo bilang 2 dyan sa probinsya ng Batanes. Samantalang signal number 1 naman dito sa Babuyan Islands at ang northeastern portion ng mainland Cagayan, which is itong Santa Ana. So ito yung mga areas ngayon na meron tayong babala ng bagyo. Ngunit kapag kumilos na nga itong si Henry papahilaga, magbabawas na tayo ng signal number 2 kasi papaangat naman na yung ating hangin na dala ng bagyong si Henry. Ngayon, inaasahan natin na pinakamaagang exit nito sa ating area of responsibility bukas ng gabi hanggang Sunday ng madaling araw. So yun yung nakikita natin na over the weekend lang mag-i-stay itong ating si Henry sa loob ng ating area of responsibility. In terms of the forecast intensity naman, ito ay makikita natin na since ito ay bubuelo, so medyo ihina ito ng bahagya, then afterwards ito ay lalakas ulit. So normal yun sa isang bagyo na kapag ito ay huminto at bumubuelo ng kanyang pagbabago ng direksyon, ito ay humihina ng bahagya. Ngunit still nakikita pa rin natin siya on typhoon category. Then ito ay kukilos na nga papalayo ng ating bansa at based sa ating forecast track, mapapanatili niya yung kanyang typhoon intensity habang bumabaybay dito sa may silangang bahagi ng southeastern China.
Meanwhile, Super Typhoon Henry or Hinam-Nor continues to pummel Batanes and Babuyan Islands with heavy rains and gusty winds as it continues to slow down over the Philippine Sea, according to Pag-asa. Now, classes have been suspended in some areas on Friday due to Typhoon Henry. The Provincial Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office, or PDRIMO, has assured it has sufficient relief goods that will be distributed to those who may be affected by Typhoon Henry. in the response cluster meeting initiated by the Cagayan Valley Regional Task Force on September 1, Cesar Roldan Esdicu of Pidrimo said that their office has distributed food packs good enough for residents of different municipalities. As part of precaution, Esdicu also said notice has been issued to the public on prohibition of sailing or anchoring of all types of vessels. Over the next 12 hours, Pag-asa said Batanes and Babuyan Islands may experience moderate to heavy rains with at times intense, while light to moderate with at times heavy rains are possible over Ilocos Norte, Apayao, and Cagayan. In tonight's other news, key agreements on defense, culture, and other areas of cooperation will be signed during President Marcos Jr.'s state visit to Indonesia and Singapore. The DFA said in his September 4 to 6 trip to Indonesia, Marcos and President Joko Widodo will witness the signing of agreements on defense, agriculture, as well as the comprehensive plan of action that will chart the two nations' bilateral priorities over the next 5 years. Agreements on counter-terrorism and data privacy will then be signed with Singapore during the chief executives meeting with Singaporean leaders from 6 to 7 of this month. This will be President Marcos' first state visit since he assumed office in June. The DFA said his first state visit as president will be to Indonesia from the 4th to the 6th of this month upon the invitation of Indonesian President Joko Widodo. Widodo and Marcos will also exchange views on major issues affecting the region and the world. In addition, Marcos will meet with business leaders to promote trade and investment to support the country's economic agenda. Indonesia, the largest economy in Southeast Asia, is the current president of G20, a strategic multilateral grouping of major developed and emerging economies. It's the incoming chair of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations next year. Now, after his Indonesian trip, President Marcos will have separate meetings with Singaporean President Halima Yacob and Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong to discuss the close bilateral relations between the two countries, as well as regional and global issues. President Marcos will witness with Lee the signing of Singapore-Philippines agreements. The DFA said as Singapore is a key trade and investment partner of the Philippines, an economic briefing and business roundtable meetings will be organized where the president intends to invite investments into the Philippines and create more job opportunities in the country. In both countries, Marcos will meet the Filipino communities to personally assure them of the government's continuing commitment to protect their rights and promote their welfare as overseas Filipinos. Meanwhile, the Philippine Consulate General in Toronto confirmed the death of a Filipino-Canadian and her daughter in a tragic stabbing in Toronto last week. Now, LV Sigod and her 20-year-old daughter, Angelica, were inside a vehicle when her former husband, Godfrey, stabbed them to death. A suspect who is now in custody, Godfrey, has been identified as Godfrey LV's ex-husband. He appeared in court on Saturday where he was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. The accused was involved in an altercation with the mother and daughter, according to police, adding that the victims and the suspect were known to each other and family members. Angelica was said to have been going to Seneca College and wanted to be a flight attendant. In other news, a meeting of group of 20 energy ministers opened on Friday in Bali, Indonesia. According to NHK, whether they can compile a joint statement at the meeting toward a stable supply of energy is still uncertain, as discord is expected between the Russian minister and the ministers of Western countries. Energy security at a time when Russia's invasion of Ukraine is affecting the supply of gas and other fuels, as well as energy transition towards cleaner sources, are likely to be debated at this meeting. With Russia in mind, Western countries have been strongly critical over energy sources being used as weapons. Russia has cut its natural gas shipments, mainly to Europe, since it began invading Ukraine. And it's feared that as Russia and China are also participating in the meeting, it will end without an agreement. In tonight's other news, a UN team has arrived in southern Ukraine to inspect that nuclear power plant in the middle of a war. Now the inspectors made the treacherous journey to reach it. Take a look.
about the plant. I worry, and I will continue to be worried about the plant until we have a situation which is more stable, which is more predictable. It is obvious that the plant and the physical integrity of the plant has been violated several times by chance, by deliberation. We are moving. We are aware of the current situation. There has been increased military activity, including this morning. Until very recently, a few minutes ago, I have been briefed by the Ukrainian regional military commander here about that and the inherent risks, but weighing pros and cons, and having come so far, we are not stopping. We are moving now. We know that there is an area, as you know, the so-called gray zone, where the last line of the Ukrainian defense comes, and before the first line of the Russian occupying forces begin, where the risks are significant. We are finishing our long-awaited visit to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. I have just completed a first tour of the key areas that we wanted to see in this first approach to the whole facility. Of course, there is a lot more to do. My team is staying on, and more importantly, and most importantly, we are establishing a continued presence from the IAEA here.
The Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, Europe's largest nuclear facility, has faced repeated shelling in recent weeks, with Kiev and Moscow blaming each other for the attacks, and it's raising concerns of a possible incident. Ukraine was the scene of the world's worst nuclear disaster in 1986, when a reactor at the northern Chernobyl plant exploded and spewed radiation into the atmosphere. In other news, Philippine President Bongbong Marcos Jr. expressed the Filipino people's condolences to the Russian people over the death of former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, who died on Tuesday, August 30, at the age of 91. He said, "I share the grief of other world leaders over the death of Mikhail Sergeyev Gorbachev, the last leader of the former Soviet Union," Marcos Jr. said in a statement issued by Malacanang. The president said Gorbachev is best remembered for the disbandment of his own political party, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which has the biggest membership in the world. President Marcos said he's credited for glasnost, referring to political reforms, and perestroika, for economic restructuring. Gorbachev, who was in power between 1985 and 1991 and helped bring U.S.-Soviet relations out of a deep freeze, was the last surviving Cold War leader. Meanwhile, Russia launched a large-scale military exercise involving several Kremlin-friendly countries, including China, with tension soaring between Moscow and Western capitals. The exercises, called Vostok 2022, are scheduled to take place until September 7 across several training grounds in Russia's Far East and in the waters off its eastern coast. Now, the drills come as Russia is locked in a standoff with Western nations over what Moscow calls its military operation in western Ukraine. The active stage of the exercises kicked off Thursday morning with combat aircraft, anti-aircraft unit drills, and mine clearance simulations in the Sea of Japan, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. According to Moscow, over 50,000 soldiers and more than 5,000 units of military equipment, including 140 aircraft and 60 ships, will be involved in the drills. Participating countries include several of Russia's neighbors, as well as Syria, India, and key ally China. Similar drills were held last 2018. Confirming its participation in the drills in August, China said the joint exercises were unrelated to the current international and regional situation. Since Russia sent troops into Ukraine on February 24, Moscow has sought closer ties with countries in Africa, South America, and Asia, particularly China. Meanwhile, Taiwanese soldiers on a tiny islet just off China's mainland shot down an unidentified commercial drone. It is the first time Taiwanese forces have downed a drone, and it comes at a time when tensions between the two neighbors are at their highest in decades, following a visit to Taipei last month by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The military said that a civilian drone had entered the restricted zone above Shiyu Islet, a small rock that lies between the Chinese mainland and Taiwan's Kinmen Islands. Taiwan has also reported a sudden spate of drone incursions by small commercially available devices in recent weeks. Videos have circulated on both Taiwanese and Chinese social media, with one showing Taiwanese soldiers hurling rocks at a drone to drive it away. Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen warned this week that the military might be forced to resort to live fire if the drones ignored warnings to leave. China has played down the incursions, with Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian saying Monday they weren't anything worth making a fuss about, as the drones were flying around Chinese territory. The U.S. Navy's USS Tripoli amphibious assault carrier made a port call in Singapore on its maiden deployment. The ship arrived at Changi Naval Base on Wednesday on its first port call outside Japan after operating in the South China Sea. Prior to embarking the 331st Marine Expeditionary Unit, Tripoli had been operating under the Lightning Carrier concept, in which it had more than a dozen F-35Bs aboard during its Pacific deployment. Singapore regularly hosts ships from foreign navies for replenishment. The U.S. Navy has previously said that USS Tripoli is operating in the U.S. 7th Fleet Area of Operations, which generally covers Asia-Pacific, to enhance interoperability with allies and partners and serve as a ready response force to defend peace and maintain stability in the Indo-Pacific region. The 844-foot-long vessel is carrying about 2,400 sailors and Marines on board, as well as 6 F-35B fighter jets. The amphibious assault ship was commissioned in 2020 and left its home port in San Diego in May on its first deployment. It resembles a small aircraft carrier and can carry a variety of aircraft and landing craft. In other news, bankrupt Sri Lanka's deposed former president Gotabaya Rajapaksa is set to end his self-imposed exile in Thailand and return home tomorrow, Saturday, according to a top defense official. The 73-year-old fled the island under military guard in July after a huge crowd stormed his official residence following months of angry public protests, blaming him for the island nation's unprecedented economic crisis. He issued his resignation from Singapore before flying onward to Bangkok, where he has been petitioning his successor to facilitate his return. Sri Lanka's constitution guarantees bodyguards, a vehicle, and housing for former presidents. Rajapaksa traveled to Thailand after Singapore declined to extend his 28-day visa, but security authorities in Bangkok told him not to step out of his hotel for his own safety. The former president had a 90-day visa to remain in Thailand, but opted to return with his wife, a bodyguard, and another aide. In other news, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommended COVID-19 booster shots from Pfizer and Moderna targeting the Omicron variant, clearing the way for the administration of the shots. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky said in a statement, quote, "The updated COVID-19 boosters are formulated to better protect against the most recently circulating COVID-19 variant, and they can help restore protection that has waned since previous vaccination and were designed to provide broader protection against newer variants. This new generation of anti-COVID vaccines targets both the original strain of coronavirus and the BA.4 and BA.5 lineages, the subvariants of Omicron that are causing the most cases in the U.S. The Pfizer-BioNTech shot is recommended for people 12 and older, and Moderna's for those 18 years and up. President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. has enjoined the communication experts to join his administration in its fight against misinformation and fake news. During the 2022 National Public Relations Congress, Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles said President Marcos is optimistic that communications professionals would use their voices to leverage positive communication in steering the nation towards full recovery and lasting unity. The president likewise urges you to join the government, she said, in fighting against the proliferation of misinformation and disinformation through inclusive, compassionate, and responsible communication, she said in a speech delivered before public relation officers and communication experts at the Peninsula Manila in Makati City. Cruz Angeles issued a statement as she noted that the Marcos administration has launched a one messaging policy which aims to prevent disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation through close collaboration among government agencies under the executive branch. In tonight's other news, Artemis 1 mission managers Mike Serafin tells reporters that there is no guarantee of a successful launch of NASA's most powerful rocket yet, after the U.S. Space Agency scrubbed Monday's launch because of an engine issue. Take a look.
There's no guarantee that we're going to get off on the 3rd, but we're going to show up and we're going to try and we're going to give it our best. We got to show up, we got to be ready, and we got to see what the day brings. And, we've got a whole host of things that could cause us to not get off any given day, weather, range, or technical. If we do not launch on Saturday, we'll be looking at a afternoon launch on the 5th. The 6th is in play. It's a fairly short launch window on the 6th of September. Should we not tank on the 5th, we may elect to move to the 6th. Once we get past the 6th of September, September the 19th is the earliest from a physics-based standpoint that we could pick it up. It's a 37-day mission with the splashdown on October the 11th.
Artemis 1 is set to blast off on the maiden voyage of a mission to take humans back to the moon and eventually to Mars. NASA has also been working to correct the technical difficulties that led to the last-minute delay of the launch during its originally scheduled window Monday. The Artemis 1 mission is an uncrewed test flight. It'll be the first launch for the Space Launch System rocket, or SLS, the most powerful in the world and which has been in development for more than a decade. If the mission goes ahead Saturday, the Orion capsule fixed atop the rocket will spend 37 days in space, orbiting the moon from about 60 miles away. The Philippine Embassy in Cambodia, in collaboration with Habitat for Humanity Cambodia, organized a build project on the 28th of August in Svaichek Tmei community located in Sangkat Kort Rokar, Phnom Penh, as part of the commemoration of the 65th anniversary of the establishment of Philippine-Cambodia diplomatic relations. Aside from the 11 embassy personnel, 30 Filipino volunteers from the Samahan ng mga Pilipino sa Cambodia, or SAMAPI, Philippine Chamber of Commerce in Cambodia, or PhilCham Cambodia, Camp Pinoy Bikers, and other members of the Filipino community participated in this project. Aside from assisting in building 3 new homes and painting 1 completed home, a seminar on COVID-19 and hygiene awareness was conducted, followed by the distribution of hygiene packs to the community. In her remarks, Philippine Ambassador Maria Melita Aquino highlighted that the activity is a demonstration of the long-lasting ties and friendship between Filipinos and Cambodians, and that the project not only builds houses but helps build lives and brings new beginnings and hope for the beneficiary families. For her part, Habitat for Humanity Cambodia National Director Ms. Bernadette Bolo Duty gave a briefing on the work of the organization and thanked the Philippine Embassy and Filipino community volunteers for helping in its advocacy of building houses and raising awareness on hygiene among the community. The activity was part of the commemoration of the 65th anniversary of the establishment of Philippine-Cambodia diplomatic relations, according to the DFA. And staying true to this year's ASEAN Day theme, which is Stronger Together, ambassadors, executives, and officers representing the region's member states, the Department of Foreign Affairs, University of the Philippines, Los Baños, and the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity convened for a tree planting and family day event. There, they signified commitments to act for ecosystems restoration as one solid community, promoting a nature-positive future for the region. In celebration of ASEAN's 55th founding anniversary, the DFA and the ACB jointly organized the commemorative activity at the latter's headquarters and at the UPLB campus on August 20. Foreign Affairs Assistant Secretary for ASEAN Affairs, Daniel Espiritu, shared that the bloc's priorities are not only limited to joint political security and economic linkages. ASEAN has already expanded the range of its concerns to non-traditional security issues, which includes, among others, the environment. Espiritu lauded the ACB, the sole ASEAN center hosted by the Philippines, for its continuous embodiment of the region's commitment to the environment, biodiversity, and sustainable development, and encouraged the countries to still support the ACB in realizing its mandate. And that is the latest news here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll see you back on Monday. Thank you for joining us. I'm Alma Angeles, and as I always say, stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.